Alright, let's go. Number 10. Nicholas Oresko. On January 23, 1945, near the German village of Tettingen, Staff Sergeant Nicholas Oresko of the 302nd Infantry Regiment, 94th Infantry Division, rose from frozen ground under withering machine gun fire and did something his training had never quite prepared him for. He decided that the only way anyone was getting out alive was if he went first, alone. His unit had been pinned by two German bunkers, each one mutually supporting the other, each one capable of killing anyone who moved in the open. The standard approach, wait for support, call for artillery, find another way around, was not producing results. Men were going to die where they lay if something didn't change. Oresko changed it. He charged the first bunker alone, cleared it, and was shot through the hip in the process. A lesser man stops there. The wound was real. The blood was real. The second bunker was still firing. Oresko assessed the situation, made a decision, and kept moving. He assaulted the second position and destroyed it as well, killing 12 German soldiers across both actions. The Medal of Honor citation that followed described his conduct in the careful, formal language of official recognition. What it could not fully capture was the quality of mind required to be wounded, to feel that, to know what it meant, and to continue anyway. That is not instinct. That is a choice made under conditions most people will never face. Nicholas Oresko lived to the age of 96, dying in 2013, one of the longest-lived Medal of Honor recipients in American history. He never seemed to think he had done anything unusual. That, perhaps, is the most unsettling fact of all. Number 9. Maynard Harrison Smith. On May 1st, 1943, a B-17 Flying Fortress of the 423rd Bombardment Squadron, 306th Bombardment Group, was returning from a raid on the German submarine pens at Lorient when German fighters tore it apart over the Bay of Biscay. The aircraft was on fire. The crew was bailing out. 5 of the 10 men were already gone, tumbling into the cold Atlantic air. Staff Sergeant Maynard Harrison Smith stayed inside. Smith was not considered a promising airman. His record before that mission was notable primarily for disciplinary infractions. His fellow crew members regarded him, by several accounts, as unreliable. He was on only his first combat mission. None of that explains what he did next. Alone in the rear of a burning aircraft, Smith manned the waist guns against continued fighter attack, fought the interior fires with a hand extinguisher, and with his bare hands, threw burning ammunition out of the fuselage to prevent a catastrophic explosion, administered first aid to 2 wounded crewmates, and kept the aircraft in a defensible condition for approximately 90 minutes. The plane made it back. The men inside it lived. The Army Air Forces awarded Smith the Medal of Honor, the first ever given to an enlisted man in that branch during the Second World War. The general who presented it reportedly had to ask which man Smith was, because nothing in his prior record had suggested he was worth remembering. How many men carry something inside them that no peacetime situation will ever reveal? Maynard Smith spent years being nobody in particular, and then a burning aircraft over the Bay of Biscay showed everyone exactly who he was. Number 8. Ivan Kozhedub. By the time the Second World War ended, Soviet Air Forces pilot Ivan Kozhedub had recorded 64 confirmed aerial victories, the highest total of any Allied pilot in the entire conflict. He had been shot down 3 times. His aircraft had been set on fire in midair. He had started the war as a flight instructor who spent his first 39 combat missions without a single kill. Then, something shifted, and it never shifted back. Kozhedub flew the Lavochkin LA-5 and later the LA-7, Soviet fighters that were at a persistent disadvantage against German Luftwaffe equipment in the early years of the Eastern Front. The conditions he operated in were ferocious. The attrition rates among Soviet airmen were devastating. To survive was an achievement. To dominate was something else entirely. On February 19, 1945, Kozhedub shot down a German Me-262, one of the first operational jet aircraft in history. making it one of the earliest jet kills ever recorded in aerial combat, according to Soviet Air Force's records. He commanded the 176th Guards Fighter Aviation Regiment, and in that entire period of command, not one of his own pilots died under his leadership. 64 kills, and he never lost a wingman. The Soviet state awarded him the title Hero of the Soviet Union 3 times, the only pilot to receive that distinction on all 3 occasions during the war itself. The Germans reportedly issued specific warnings to their pilots about him by name. A man who could not score a kill in 39 attempts had become the thing the enemy briefed against. 64 confirmed kills, 3 gold stars, not one pilot lost under his command. Whatever Ivan Kozhedub found on his 40th mission, no one who flew against him afterward lived long enough to describe it. Number 7. Léo Major. On the night of April 13th, 1945, Canadian Corporal Léo Major of Le Régiment de la Chaudière, 3rd Canadian Infantry Division, walked into the Dutch city of Zwolle alone. He was armed with a Sten gun and a bag of grenades. He had not been ordered to take the city. He had volunteered to reconnoiter it. He decided reconnoiter was not enough. His reconnaissance partner, Willie Arsenault, had been killed earlier that evening, shot by a German patrol on the outskirts of the city. A reasonable man turns back at that point. Major went forward. He entered the German-occupied city alone, in darkness, and began making himself felt. What followed was a relentless, one-man assault on the garrison's nerve. Major attacked the SS headquarters, killed the SS commander inside it, set multiple buildings on fire to simulate a larger attacking force, and radioed false reports of a massive Canadian advance bearing down on the city. By morning, the German garrison had abandoned Zwolle without a single Canadian soldier entering it in force. The city of Zwolle celebrates Léo Major to this day, every year, on the anniversary of its liberation. It was not his first act of this kind. In 1944, near Rosendahl, Major had single-handedly captured 93 German soldiers in a single night. He had also refused his first Distinguished Conduct Medal on the grounds that the general presenting it had made poor tactical decisions, and therefore was not qualified to recognize courage in others. He then went out and earned a second one. An entire German garrison abandoned a fortified city because one man, blind in one eye from a phosphorus grenade wound sustained months earlier, wanted them to believe an army was behind him. The city was free by morning. The line between audacity and madness may not matter very much when the result is the same. Number 6. Edward Carter Jr. On March 23, 1945, near the German town of Speyer, Staff Sergeant Edward Carter Jr. of the 12th Armored Division crossed 150 yards of open ground under direct enemy fire. He had volunteered to do it after 2 other men attempted the same crossing and were killed. He was hit 5 times during the advance. He reached cover, killed 6 Germans at close range, captured 2 more, and used them to shield his return to American lines, bringing back intelligence on enemy positions that the assault needed. Carter had been fighting since before most people thought of it as his war. He had served in the Spanish Civil War as a teenager, fighting against Franco's forces in the International Brigades, and had combat experience in China before he ever put on an American uniform. The army he served in was segregated. The units black soldiers were assigned to were often kept from frontline combat roles. Carter had pushed to get as close to the fighting as the system would allow. What he did near Speyer on that March morning should have earned him the Medal of Honor immediately. It did not. He received the Distinguished Service Cross, a significant decoration, but not the highest one. After the war, Army Counterintelligence Corps investigators opened a file on him, flagged by his pre-war leftist associations. He was effectively pushed out of the service he had bled for. In 1997, following a congressionally mandated review that confirmed black soldiers had been systematically excluded from the Medal of Honor during the Second World War, President Clinton awarded it posthumously to Carter and 6 others in a White House ceremony. Edward Carter was shot 5 times in a single charge, killed 6 men, and carried 2 prisoners back to American lines. The United States government took 34 years after his death to decide that was worth its highest honor. He never knew it was coming. Number 5. Charles Commando Kelly. On September 13, 1943, at the Italian village of Alta Villa Silentina, Corporal Charles Kelly of the 143rd Infantry Regiment, 36th Infantry Division, found himself alone in a building that the German army wanted back. What followed was one of the most documented and improbable solo defensive actions of the entire Italian campaign, conducted by a man who simply did not appear to recognize the concept of an unacceptable situation. His company had been fighting for the village across the previous days, and by this point the Germans were pressing hard to retake it. Kelly took up a position and began working through every weapon available to him, methodically and without panic. His Medal of Honor citation, one of the most detailed of the war, lists the sequence: a rifle, a carbine, a Thompson submachine gun, a bazooka, a caliber .30 machine gun. He used all of them. When conventional ammunition ran short, Kelly took 60mm mortar shells, pulled their safety pins, and threw them like grenades at advancing German infantry. That detail appears in the official citation because witnesses reported it and it was corroborated. He held the position for hours, covering the withdrawal of his entire company, giving them the time they needed to pull back without being overrun. He asked for nothing in return. General Mark Clark personally presented Kelly with the Medal of Honor in a ceremony that drew significant attention. After the war, Kelly returned to Pittsburgh and went back to work in the steel mills. The recognition faded. The record did not. The citation lists the weapons. The numbers are staggering enough on their own. But the fact underneath all of them is simpler than any statistic. When every other man had gone, Charles Kelly stayed. And because he stayed, they lived. Number 4. Thomas Baker. On July 19, 1944, on the island of Saipan in the Mariana Islands, Sergeant Thomas Baker of the 105th Infantry Regiment, 27th Infantry Division, asked his men to do something no soldier should have to ask. He told them to prop him against a tree, put a pistol in his hand, and leave him behind. He was too badly wounded to walk. They were going to be overrun if they stayed. He told them to go, and he would handle what came next. They found him the next morning with the pistol empty and 8 Japanese soldiers dead in front of him. Baker had been fighting in extraordinary ways since June 19th, a month earlier, when a fortified Japanese cave position had repulsed every squad-level assault sent against it. Baker took a bazooka and attacked it alone, destroying the position and killing approximately 27 enemy soldiers. That action alone would have defined most soldiers' war. What came on July 19th was something different. The Japanese banzai charge that engulfed his position that night was the largest of the entire Pacific War, an assault by an estimated 3,000 Japanese soldiers, the Gyokusai charge ordered after the fall of Saipan's defensive perimeter. Baker's regiment was devastated. He was hit, and then hit again, and then hit once more, refusing evacuation each time. When he could no longer stand, he refused it again. The Medal of Honor was awarded posthumously. The citation records the sequence of events with precision. What no citation can fully record is the quality of the decision Baker made at the end, when he calculated what he could still offer, and offered all of it. 8 rounds. 8 men. There is a distance between a soldier who accepts death and one who, in that final moment, decides exactly what to do with it. Thomas Baker closed that distance completely. Number 3. John Basilone. On the night of October 24th, 1942, on Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands, Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone of the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines held a machine gun position at Henderson Field against an assault by thousands of Japanese soldiers that lasted 9 hours. When it was over, Basilone was one of a handful of men still standing. The Japanese assault had broken. The airfield, the most strategically critical piece of ground in the Pacific at that moment, had held. Henderson Field was not simply a tactical objective. It was the fulcrum of the entire Guadalcanal campaign, the reason the Japanese were pressing so hard, and the Americans were dying to keep it. Losing it would have unraveled months of brutal, costly fighting, and handed the initiative back to an enemy that had not yet begun to lose. Basilone and his small group of Marines understood this, or perhaps they simply understood that the men beside them were not going to move. The effect was the same. Basilone maintained two 30-caliber M1917 Browning machine guns almost single-handedly for the duration of the assault. When ammunition ran out, he moved through active fire to retrieve belts from a neighboring position. When a gun jammed, he cleared it with his bare hands in the dark, burning them on the superheated barrel. He was relentless, and the position held. The Marine Corps awarded him the Medal of Honor, one of the first presented to an enlisted Marine in the war. They offered him safety afterward, a stateside posting, war bond tours, a life removed from the killing. He turned it down, requested reassignment to a combat unit, and trained with the Marines preparing for the next major amphibious assault. That assault was Iwo Jima. John Basilone landed on the beach at Iwo Jima on February 19, 1945, the first morning of the invasion. He was killed that day. The Medal of Honor, the offer of safety, the refusal, the beach at Iwo Jima. He had survived the thing that should have killed him, and then walked back into the fire because he believed that was where he was supposed to be. On February 19, 1945, the war agreed with him. Number 2. Lafayette, War Daddy Poole. Between June 27th and September 19th, 1944, a period of 81 consecutive days of combat across France and into Germany, Staff Sergeant Lafayette Poole and the crew of his M4A1 Sherman tank, named In the Mood, destroyed 258 enemy vehicles. That figure includes tanks, half-tracks, artillery pieces, and other armored vehicles. It stands, by the records of the 3rd Armored Division, as the highest total achieved by any American tanker in the Second World War. No American armor crew in any subsequent conflict has exceeded it. The Sherman tank was not the weapon you would choose for this kind of work. Against the German Panzer IV, the Panther, and especially the Tiger, it was outgunned, under-armored, and prone to catastrophic fire when penetrated, a fact so widely known among American tankers that they called it the Ronson after the cigarette lighter. Poole drove one of these vehicles directly at the enemy, repeatedly, across 81 days, leading from the front and advancing ahead of the main line to draw fire and identify positions. The 3rd Armored Division's records credit Poole's crew with killing or capturing hundreds of enemy soldiers across that period, in addition to the vehicle count. He received the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, a Bronze Star, and a Purple Heart. He did not receive the Medal of Honor. The Army's criteria for armored warfare decorations did not account efficiently for a man whose primary achievement was the systematic destruction of enemy vehicles at a rate and scale the criteria had not anticipated. On September 19, 1944, his 81st day of combat, a German round hit In the Mood. The explosion took both of Poole's legs. His war was over. He survived, returned to Texas, and by multiple accounts never publicly complained about the absence of the decoration his record would seem to demand. 258 vehicles, 81 days, both legs gone, no Medal of Honor. There are things one man can do in a war that the systems built to recognize them simply cannot contain, and Lafayette Poole's record is the clearest proof of that the United States Army ever produced. Number 1. Audie Murphy. On January 26, 1945, near the Alsatian village of Holtzwihr in eastern France, 2nd Lieutenant Audie Murphy of Company B, 1st Battalion, 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division, ordered his men to fall back to the tree line. Then he climbed alone onto a burning tank destroyer, picked up its 50 caliber machine gun, and held off 6 German tanks and an estimated 250 infantry for approximately 1 hour. He was 19 years old. He had a bullet wound in his leg. The vehicle he was standing on was on fire. Murphy had enlisted in 1942 at 17, rejected initially by the Marine Corps and the paratroopers for being too small and too young, accepted eventually by the Army, which shipped him to North Africa, and then Sicily, and then Italy, and then southern France, and then into Alsace across 27 months of nearly continuous combat. He had watched his closest friend die. He had been wounded before. He had received decorations before, including the Distinguished Service Cross and 2 Silver Stars. By January 1945, he was one of the most experienced combat infantrymen in the American Army, and he was still a teenager. At Holtzwihr, his company was being overwhelmed. The tank destroyer had already been knocked out and abandoned. Murphy mounted it anyway, called in artillery coordinates by field telephone, while simultaneously firing the mounted gun into the advancing German infantry, and refused to stop. He later said he stayed on the vehicle because it gave him the best field of fire. He said it the way someone describes a practical decision. The Germans broke off the assault. Murphy climbed down, walked back to his men, and continued leading them. The Medal of Honor citation describes the engagement in precise language. The Army eventually tallied his full record as 33 decorations from the United States, France, and Belgium, including the Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, the Legion of Merit, 2 Bronze Stars with Valor Device, and 3 Purple Hearts. He is the most decorated American combat soldier of the Second World War by any measure the Army has ever applied. He was also, by his own account and by those of everyone who knew him after, a man who could not sleep in a dark room without a loaded pistol within reach. He testified before Congress about what combat did to the men who survived it, years before the condition had a clinical name, years before the country had a framework for understanding what he was describing. He wrote about it in his autobiography. He carried it every day until May 28, 1971, when a private plane went down in fog near Roanoke, Virginia, and Audie Murphy died in the wreckage of a Virginia mountainside, 26 years after Holtzwihr. Every number in his record is extraordinary, but the number that matters most appears in no citation and on no decoration. After the parades and the magazine covers and the movie contracts, the most decorated American soldier of the Second World War could not close his eyes in the dark without a weapon in his hand. He had given everything the country asked for, and what came back was a man still fighting a battle no medal could name and no army could help him win. If you want to see more videos like this, click the video on screen now and make sure to subscribe.